Before the world recognized your strength, before your name echoed in places they swore you'd never reach, you were counted out, overlooked, and dismissed. They mocked your quiet presence. They misjudged your silence. They assumed that your calm meant weakness, and your distance meant disconnection. But they were wrong. You weren't absent. You were observing. You weren't lost. You were listening. And while they plotted and performed, you were being prepared by something far greater than they could ever understand. This message is for every soul who has been underestimated, for every heart that was forced to walk alone, and for every chosen one who doubted their own fire. If you've ever felt like you were being pushed to the edge, remember this: God doesn't place his warriors in the spotlight until they're ready. The hidden years weren't punishment. They were preparation. And now the time has come. If these words speak to your spirit, take a moment to subscribe to Bible Peak and boldly comment below, "I claim the strength God placed in me." Because when you declare who you are, heaven moves on your behalf. Your voice matters. Your journey is seen. Your fire is rising. They called you a fool, thinking you were nothing but a background figure in a story they believed they controlled. They treated you like a pawn, never realizing you were a storm in disguise. They smiled while scheming. They spoke behind your back, believing their shallow games had depth. But as time unfolded, their confidence began to rot, and their arrogance turned to anxiety. Because what they failed to recognize was this: every move they made against you wasn't a step toward victory. It was a step toward exposure. They weren't the hunter. They were the bait. Chosen ones don't need to chase revenge. Your very existence is justice. Your presence is a mirror that forces deceivers to face themselves. They laughed while you listened. They planned while you prayed. And in their blindness, they failed to see that the power was never in their hands, it was in your silence. True strength is never loud. It's not about how many people see you. It's about what happens when the right moment arrives. Like a storm, your power didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to arrive. And now they can feel it, the shift. In the atmosphere, the weight in their chests, the crack in their voices when they try to speak the same words they once used to mock you. They're fumbling through a narrative they no longer control. While they scrambled for attention, you remained still. You studied their patterns, watched their contradictions, and documented their every move. They thought you were unaware, but you were simply waiting for alignment. God doesn't rush. He orchestrates. And when the time is right, he reveals. Now the script has flipped, and the story they tried to write for you has been torn apart by the truth. They don't fear your voice because it's loud. They fear it because it carries authority. They don't avoid your eyes because of hatred. They avoid them because of conviction. They see now what they tried to deny, that the one they thought was powerless is now unstoppable. The chosen aren't called to fit in. They're called to stand out. And that's why your presence makes them tremble. Because they don't know how to face someone who can't be manipulated, someone who isn't desperate for approval, someone who knows their worth without needing to be told. You have become what they feared the most: a soul awakened, unshaken, and aligned with purpose. But let's take a step deeper. Why did they believe they had control in the first place? Because you made them comfortable. Your humility, your kindness, your silence, they mistook all of it for weakness. But the truth is, your light moved differently. It didn't need to be loud to be powerful. It didn't need validation to be real. And now, the very traits they once ridiculed are the ones they try to mimic. They thought control was about dominance, about forcing their presence, about manipulating the narrative. But control isn't noise. Control is knowledge. It's presence. It's discernment. And the greatest power you carried was knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to wait, when to step forward and when to let them fall into their own reflection, because that's the thing about the chosen ones: they don't just win. They allow their enemies to destroy themselves, not out of malice, but out of divine order. They don't need to expose anyone. The truth does it for them. And the greatest justice isn't revenge. It's watching those who tried to write you off realize they never had a pen in the first place. So let them stumble. Let them panic. Let them scramble for explanations. You don't need to respond. Your rise speaks louder than any words ever could. Your journey is the sermon. Your survival is the testimony. And your peace, that's the proof of your power. The most dangerous kind of power is the kind rooted in humility. The enemy is not afraid of loud voices or flashy confidence. He is terrified of a soul who knows their authority and doesn't need to prove it. The chosen ones are not walking with swagger, they're walking with sacred awareness. They don't boast, they build. They don't dominate, they discern. And that's what separates them from those who sought power through manipulation, deception, and pride. To walk in divine power is to walk in grace. Grace isn't softness. It's strength under control. It's the ability to wipe the dust off your feet without bitterness. It's the ability to forgive without forgetting who you are. The grace that flows through the chosen isn't weakness. It's evidence of alignment. You don't respond because you're scared. You remain silent because you're steady. The ones who shouted to be heard are the same ones now silenced by the echo of your integrity. As God elevates you, it is critical to remain grounded. Authority that is not anchored in love becomes toxic. Purpose without compassion becomes hollow. And the chosen are never called to be arrogant about their anointing. They are called to be stewards of what they carry. You've been entrusted with vision, with discernment, with influence, but never for control, always for service. This is where your maturity is tested. When you could clap back, but you pray instead. When you could destroy someone's reputation with truth, but you choose to release them to God. When you could flex your knowledge, but instead you listen. It's not that you don't see. It's that you choose not to act out of impulse. You understand the assignment is too important to be distracted by drama. True power isn't in how quickly you react. It's in how deeply you understand. You've been through too much to waste energy explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer beg to be seen. You are content being hidden if it means being holy. You are not chasing the stage, you're protecting the altar. Because you know where your power truly comes from, but don't mistake grace for passivity. The chosen are not passive. They are precise. When the time is right, they speak with clarity. When the moment is divine, they move with fire. But they never act to please the crowd. They act to please the one who called them. Their voice carries. Wait not because it's loud, but because it's birthed in obedience. When others lose their way in ambition, you stay anchored in assignment. When others confuse popularity with purpose, you remain planted in truth. Because chosen ones don't compare their path to others. They understand that God custom builds their elevation. You're not in competition. You're in covenant, and that covenant means protection. Many things didn't touch you not because you were smart, but because you were covered. There were traps you walked around without even knowing. There were battles God fought on your behalf while you slept. And the more you recognize this, the more you walk in reverence. Not entitlement, not ego, but it's that keeps you humble. You realize you're just a vessel, a carrier of something eternal. You are not the source. You are the lampstand, And the light you carry isn't to spotlight you, it's to illuminate the path for others. This is what makes your power different. It's redemptive. It's healing. It invites others in rather than keeping them out. You don't use it to elevate yourself. You use it to lift others. The same way God pulled you from the shadows, you now reach back for those still walking. In them, and yes, there will be some who still misunderstand you, who twist your words, who question your motives. But that's not your burden to carry. The fruit speaks for itself. You don't need to argue with those who only see from the outside. You've been transformed from the inside. So let your posture preach. Let your peace confuse the enemy. Let your forgiveness dismantle the need for vengeance. Let your silence hold more power than their shouting ever could. Because the moment you choose grace over retaliation, you elevate beyond the reach of petty warfare. God is not looking for performers. He's looking for surrendered ones. And the more surrendered you are, the more He trusts you with His glory. Not for fame, not for clout, but for impact. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be light. And light doesn't chase darkness. It simply shines. Every chosen one, at some point in their journey, will face the weight of separation. Not because they've done something wrong, but because they've been called to something higher. As God elevates you in spirit, discernment, and purpose, not everyone around you will be able to go where you're going. And that realization can feel lonely, even painful. But it's not punishment, it's divine preservation. It's not rejection, it's redirection. Separation is not always physical. Sometimes it's spiritual. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone because your spirit has shifted. What once entertained you now feels empty. What once drew you in now repels you. Conversations you used to enjoy now seem shallow. Environments you once thrived in now feel draining. That's not something wrong with you, that's growth. The more awakened you become, the more sensitive you are to spiritual frequencies. You begin to pick up on what's unseen, the motives beneath the smiles, the tension behind the words, the unspoken battles in people's hearts. You can no longer ignore what others pretend not to see. And that makes you different, but being different isn't a curse. It's confirmation. You weren't made to blend in. You were made to stand out. And sometimes standing out means walking alone, at least for a season. Think of Moses in the wilderness, David in the caves, Jesus in the garden. Each of them had to walk through solitude before stepping into their assignment. Because God often removes the noise so you can hear His voice clearly, the people who once applauded you may now avoid you. The friendships that once felt like home may now feel foreign. You may even be misunderstood by those you love most. But don't let the grief of separation pull you back into spaces you've outgrown. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's faithful. Just because it feels safe doesn't mean it's sacred. You're not meant to water yourself down to keep people comfortable. You are not responsible for shrinking your light to keep others from squinting. If your presence agitates someone's demons, that is not your problem. It's a sign that your spirit carries power. Let it. You are made to disrupt darkness, not dance with it. And here's the truth: your growth will offend those who refuse to grow. Your peace will provoke those who are used to chaos. Your clarity will challenge their confusion. But that's okay. The goal is not to be accepted. The goal is to be aligned. Some relationships were seasonal. They served a purpose, but they were never meant to last forever. When the purpose expires, the connection dissolves. Don't chase what God is removing. Don't mourn doors that are closing. Every exit is making room for divine entrance. Every goodbye is preparing you for a greater hello. The chosen must learn to bless and release, to forgive and move on, to love from a distance when necessary, not in bitterness, but in wisdom, because you can't carry the weight of everyone and still run your race. You are not called to be a savior. You are called to be obedient, and when it comes to environments, God will often begin to stir discomfort in the places that no longer serve your assignment. The job that once excited you now drains you. The room you once walked into with joy now feels heavy. That's not coincidence. That's the Spirit nudging you toward transition. Don't ignore the nudge. Don't silence the whisper. When God begins to shift your atmosphere, it means your next season is calling. And the longer you stay in expired spaces, the more you delay your destiny. Sometimes the elevation looks like subtraction. Less noise, fewer people, smaller circles, but greater depth, sharper vision, stronger discernment, intimacy over influence, purpose over popularity, quality over quantity, and with that refinement comes responsibility. You must become a gatekeeper of your life. You can't let just anyone speak into your spirit. Not everyone has the spiritual maturity to understand where you're going. Some will try to counsel you from a place of fear. Others will mask control as concern. Be kind, but be clear. You answer to God, not to opinions. As you walk in this awareness, God will send new alignments, people who sharpen, not drain. People who speak life, not confusion. People who don't compete with your light, but reflect it. These are your tribe, your spiritual family. The ones who walk beside you without envy, without agenda. When you find them, honor them. Build with them. Pray with them. But even as you build, always return to the source. Never let community replace communion. Never let activity replace intimacy. The noise of even good things can drown out the voice of God if you're not careful. Stay anchored. Stay low. Stay in the secret place. Once a chosen one fully awakens, the final call is no longer just about healing, separating, or preparing. The call becomes a divine invitation to build, not for yourself, but for others. To lead, not from a throne, but from a posture of service. To speak, not to impress, but to restore. To walk through this world like a torchbearer, lighting the path for those still wandering in the dark, because this was never just about you. God didn't place all that fire in your bones for survival alone. He placed it in you for legacy. He healed you so you could heal others. He delivered you so you could go back and open the same prison doors you once sat behind. He whispered your name in the wilderness so that when you emerged, you would call out for others who thought they were forgotten too. The world is full of people carrying invisible wounds, silent battles, and spiritual hunger they can't even explain. Some of them are in your home. Some sit beside you at work. Some smile in photos while breaking inside. And guess who God will use to reach them? You. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you have every answer, but because you know the one who does, the final assignment. Of the chosen is influence, not the kind you see on screens, but the kind that shifts hearts. The kind that walks into a room and brings peace. The kind that prays quietly in the spirit and breaks chains no one else even knew were there. The kind that sees people not for who they pretend to be, but for who God created them to become, you. Begin to understand that leadership in the kingdom looks like humility. The higher God takes you, the deeper He roots you. True elevation comes through servanthood. You don't need to climb over others to be seen. You lift others to their feet, so they can see too. You celebrate when others rise. You rejoice when others are called, because you know there's no competition in covenant. What God has for you will always find you. The fire in you becomes a safe place for others. People are drawn to your stillness, your confidence, your consistency. They want to know how you carry so much peace, why your words carry so much weight. And you'll tell them it's not you, it's God. It's the quiet years of being misunderstood, the hidden seasons of deep surrender, the relentless grace that never let you go. And as you keep walking, something beautiful begins to unfold. Your life becomes a message, not just your testimony, but your daily choices. How you speak to strangers, how you forgive when it's hard, how you keep showing up when no one applauds, how you bless others in secret. These moments, small in the eyes of man, are thunderous in the eyes of heaven. This is legacy, not fame, not fortune, but faithfulness. You'll start to see the fruit, not just in miracles, but in moments. A broken person smiles again because of your kindness. A weary soul finds hope after your prayer. A young one watches how you live and decides to seek God for themselves. That's impact. That's power. That's kingdom. And though your journey has been marked with battles, betrayals, and brokenness, you'll look back and see beauty in all of it. Every tear watered a seed. Every loss made room for life. Every silence was filled with sacred instructions. And now you carry not just survival, but spiritual authority, compassion, and vision. But even with all this, never forget where the fire came from. Stay in the presence. Keep your heart pure. Keep your spirit soft. Guard your oil, your connection. To God is your lifeline. Your altar must never go cold. Because as long as you burn, others will find their way home. You are not just chosen, you are sent. You are not just healed, you are called. You are not just free, you are equipped. And the world is waiting. So walk forward now, not in fear, but in fire. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Love, even if your heart has been broken. Build, even if your hands still tremble, because you were born for this, anointed for this, and the time is now. Let your legacy be one of light, love, and holy fire. Let heaven say of you, they finished well. And let your life echo into eternity, a chosen one who rose, who loved, who lit the way.